We're joined now by political reporter Jackson Gosnell. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, good to be with you, Wyatt.
Let's just kind of start out with the president and the meeting that happened with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu there at Mar-a-Lago, not at the White House, which is, of course, where he has been in previous meetings. What do you make out of kind of what came from this meeting?
Well, I think they're trying to make progress. The president's been trying to do this not only on this front, but also with what's happening between Ukraine and Putin as well. So I think the president is focused on bringing solutions around the world. This is an example of that. It's interesting that it happened at Mar-a-Lago. The president has dubbed his home in Florida the Winter White House, and I think that's on full display with all these recent high-profile meetings.
And do you think, with respect to what we're seeing in the conservative movement, Republicans specifically, usually Republicans and conservatives are pretty united around their support for Israel, but what we're starting to see with respect to the likes of Candace Owens, people like Tucker Carlson, is they're really kind of starting to distance themselves from Israel. They're, in some cases, arguing that what's happening in Gaza is, an offensive effort by Israel that constitutes genocide, as Candace Owens says, which is obviously very extreme. And so I'm just wondering, going into the midterms, maybe even 2028, what you foresee this impact being, given the level of division that we are now seeing.
Well, I think a lot of the people on the right need to get it together. They need to be united. That is what helped them win the White House and have overwhelming successes in the 2024 election. And we're seeing a shift in the Republican Party. We're seeing them turn against one another. One of the more recent examples is Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's public feud with President Trump and his dislike of her. I think that has rubbed a lot of Trump supporters the wrong way because they still support her, despite the wrath that they're having right now. So I think that this divide is going to be hugely impactful in the upcoming elections, because if they don't get it together and start putting out the right messaging, they're going to lose as it relates to the midterms.
And you mentioned Ukraine there in your first answer. I am curious because, of course, the relationship between Zelensky and President Trump, not as strong, I think it's fair to say, as the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu. But this meeting, it seems, went fairly well. But from your perspective, what needs to happen in order for Donald Trump to play kind of that ceasefire broker role that he did with respect to Israel and Hamas, where, we saw Iran kind of make some concessions? What does he need to do in order to be successful in trying to bring about peace in the Ukrainian region?
I think that's the question that people around the world are asking, and I don't know the secret sauce. The president himself has said that he expected to resolve this conflict very quickly. And just days ago, he named off a number of other conflicts that he was able to wrap up very quickly. This is one that's taking more time. He says it's very complex and it's going to take more time. Even though they're having these high-level discussions and meetings, President Trump has warned that an end may not be in sight for even a few more weeks. And that is assuming that everything goes according to plan. So I guess this is a rather complex one. It's one that the president didn't foresee being such an issue for so long, but here we are, and I think he's working hard to get it done.
And one thing that you're starting to see, you have Russian President Vladimir Putin, for example, who told Donald Trump that Ukraine was behind an attack on his private residence. And you're starting to see, I think it's fair to say, people on the Russian side trying to, in many ways, coerce people within the United States to be kind of more loyal and more supportive of kind of the Russian dictatorship as a whole. What are you gauging as it relates to the public opinion aspect of things within the United States on support for countries like Israel, countries like Ukraine, where they are kind of embroiled in these conflicts? But at the other end of that, you have the United States, who is giving them a lot of money, and that's fueling a lot of resentment within the U.S. as well.
It is, and I think a lot of Americans, they don't want their money going to these foreign wars. They want investment at home. They want things to improve at home. I mentioned earlier about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and one of her priorities is being America first, and one of her criticisms of the president is that he is going on foreign trips and dealing with other countries. So a lot of Americans want the focus to be at home. But I think for the world to have peace, the president has to be involved in conversations with other countries around the world that are at the center of these problems. And speaking of the conflict amongst Americans in terms of support for Israel and Ukraine, everyone has their own position. It depends on where they get their information. I would venture to say that if you watch certain news channels, you feel one way, and if you watch others, you feel another way. I think that's just part of a larger problem across our society, and I don't know that there's a perfect answer.
And if you look to the impact that it's likely to have on the midterms that are obviously coming up now next year, we're just days away from 2026, I do wonder how much we're likely to see candidates like Marjorie Taylor Greene focus very much on kind of the domestic picture issues solely that are impacting the United States, as opposed to, in many ways, like it or not, what the president is doing, and that is taking kind of a yes, America first approach, but also recognizing that other countries need to be at peace in order for America to solely be put at the forefront.
I think the frustration you're seeing from a lot of Americans is that they voted in terms of hoping that all of these problems would be solved. The border crisis, the affordability crisis, healthcare, among others. And while some of those promises have been fulfilled on, such as border security, we're seeing deportations, among other things, there is also this cost component. And the economy is doing well, but it could be doing better. Costs could be coming down even further. And so I think you're going to see a lot of Republican candidates talk about those America First priorities and getting things back on track at home, because that's where the frustration with voters is they're not seeing as much progress as they would have liked to by now.
And you mentioned kind of the frustration that we're seeing from voters. I think voter apathy, voter disillusionment certainly has always been a very big issue. How much do you think some of these geopolitical issues that we've been experiencing, and it's not even, I mean, Israel and Ukraine are the ones that tend to get the most discussion, but if you look to Afghanistan, that's still a crisis that is largely unresolved with respect to the Taliban. Do Americans understand kind of the intersection of foreign policy and domestic politics to the extent that perhaps they should?
Probably not. I think it's a blurry line. People focus on their everyday issues and they're not so much worried about what's going on around the world. That may be frank and harsh because there are some terrible things that we should care about that are happening. But at the same rate, people care about their daily lives when they go to the grocery store, the gas pump, so on and so forth. And they want those problems to be fixed. I think there's heavier emphasis on that. The White House has sort of pushed back and said, hey, look, we inherited a mess. It's going to take a while to fix it. And they're trying to do that while also appeasing the voters who have put them there, who are a little frustrated.
I wonder, obviously, you're young, I'm relatively young as well, and I wonder what you think as it relates to the rise in anti Semitism that we're seeing amongst Gen Z, because that does connect to the broader geopolitical challenges of the year. Here in Canada, a city like Montreal is subject frequently to anti Semitic attacks. You look to Bondi Beach in Australia as well, a number of different attacks that have been kind of happening recently. You're also a university student in addition to being a journalist, and I wonder what you experience on your university campus, maybe even with respect to the level of anti-Semitism, and then more broadly, you just came back from Arizona covering a conference, I know as well, and the level of anti-Semitism that is being shown by political figures, not even just everyday people.
Well, it's certainly a problem. I think the temperature needs to be turned down. We say it all the time, but things keep on happening. So I don't really know the right answer for that, other than I would encourage people to turn it down. We've got to get back to respecting each other, being able to have a dialogue despite our disagreements, and you shouldn't dehumanize someone because you disagree with them.
But is it a big issue on campus, would you say?
I would say on some more than others. Where I am, it's not as big of a problem. I don't hear about it as much, but obviously you go on X and social media and you see widespread problems at universities across the country and across the world. Thankfully, I'm not seeing it that prevalently where I am.
All right, we'll leave it there. Jackson Gosnell, thank you so much.
Thanks, Wyatt.
And coming up after the break, BC's wildfire season